everyone. Welcome to the Self Love Project, a work of love by over 30 people. A work of love by over 30 people, which is just so incredible. So, the first thing I want to say is thank you so much to everyone who was involved in making this project a success. I would not have been able to do this without you all. So, thank you so much for just being willing and excited and happy to send me voice memos to make this come to life. My vision for the project was to bring different perspectives to the podcast on the whole concept of self-love. And we're going to go into the different aspects with each episode that will be released. So we'll talk about self-love, we'll talk about self-care, self-reflection, and self-awareness. We'll talk about self-celebration, self-improvement, boundaries, self-compassion and forgiveness, relationships with others, and how they influence self-love. I'm a firm believer in learning from others. And so even when I was creating this podcast, my goal was to create a podcast that would bring different perspectives. And so with this project, it's bringing so many different perspectives on aspects of self-love. And so my hope is that when people listen to this, they can get at least one thing, learn one new thing from somebody, or you could listen and be like, oh, this really resonates with me. Or you could listen and be like, oh, you know what? Maybe if I start doing this, that could actually help me out. So that's my hope, is that we all learn from someone out there and that we can all continue to grow. So I really hope that you guys will enjoy this project. Make sure that you share with people. I think there's just so much that can be learned from this project, and I'm so excited. So, without further ado, I present to you our 7th episode in the Self-Love Project.
Do you find it easier to forgive yourself or to forgive others? What helps you to forgive yourself? How do you show yourself compassion? I think it is harder to forgive myself than forgive others. I think it sits really heavy when I do something that I regret, especially when it hurts someone else. The one thing that has helped me in this area is a phrase that I learned from a loved one's therapist. We love therapists who can speak to us through others. This phrase is, I did the best with the information I had at the time. I remind myself of this phrase quite often. While it's not always true for every situation and every mistake, it helps me to focus on learning from my mistakes and focusing on doing something better in the next time or making amends where I can. Rather than just wallowing in the past and sitting still on the regret.
I find it's easier for me to forgive others 100%. I tend to give other people the benefit of the doubt, believe that their intentions were good and honest to justify or explain why they might have done or not done something. Whereas for myself, I tend to be much less forgiving. I get scared that others will assume my intentions were not good or they're not going to like me. So I really, work hard to make sure that I don't make mistakes or start issues or even make it look like that I've started an issue, because I want people to, like me and assume my intentions were good. So that can get me into some trouble sometimes, because then my relationships or friendships become very unequal, because I'm putting so much effort and work in and maybe not getting the same in return. And so that can affect my happiness and what I'm getting out of my relationships in my life. So I've begun working on this and still have a lot of improvement to do. But what has helped me forgive myself more is to kind of change my mindset. And I think I do that best by asking myself different types of questions to kind of like flip the mindset I have. So asking questions like, instead of how much do I care about what others think, how much do I care about how I feel? Or ask myself, like, let's be honest with myself and ask if I believe my intentions or actions were good or acceptable. Or ask myself questions like, do I really want to deal with the sadness or the difficulty of bearing this burden or carrying this burden of, working hard to make others, not think I've done something bad? Like, do I want to deal with that? Or can I just be more compassionate to myself so I can let it go and live in peace? So just like some simple questions that I ask myself that have kind of helped flip the script in my mind and help me be a little more forgiving to myself and maybe not like overly forgiving to others?
Yo, that was also a journey. um, it was a hard journey, and I think self-love is a journey, guys. Like, it's not easy. It has taken me a while, like a very long time, to come to the point that I'm at now. And I would say, no, it wasn't easy to forgive myself back then. But now I'm at a point where I find it very easy to forgive myself, to give myself grace, to know that I'm not perfect and no one is. And we all make mistakes. It's also something, it also depends on what it is that I'm forgiving myself for, but it's also, if it's something that's really deep, it will take a bit of time. I tend to dwell on things, which is also something that I'm working on overthinking, on stopping to overthink. So dwelling and overthinking is not a very good combination. So depending on what it is that I'm forgiving myself, it takes a bit of time, but prayer helps me a lot in trying to forgive myself and forgiving others as well. And one thing, I think the test for me, especially around forgiving others, was with the person, I don't like calling him my ex because he's my nothing. Is the person that I dated, the most recent person that I dated, and we're not together. That was the biggest test of my life, because it's this person who broke up with me in a 20-minute conversation over a phone call and ghosted me, basically blocked me, blindsided me as well, because I didn't know that was coming. So that was the biggest test of my life on forgiveness, because I had to forgive that person to move on. And so with that, I am confident that I don't want to say I find it easy, but I do forgive others. And this was unforgivable thing, but I actually did forgive them for me to be able to move on. So yes, I forgive. And it's also through the grace of God. Like, I would not have been able to do this by myself. And so forgiveness, I think, to be able to forgive, I believe that you need God. And it's not something that you can do by yourself, by your own flesh. You need the grace of God to be able to forgive someone and to be able to forgive yourself. So yes. And the last question, which was, how do I show myself compassion? I think just giving myself grace. Hey, yeah, giving myself grace, just knowing that I'm not perfect. And in all of that, it's all through the grace of God. Just having God in my life, I believe, has helped me so much in all these things. Being it forgiveness, or being it self-love, being it, acknowledging my achievements, and so forth and so forth. So yeah.
Ooh, that's a pretty good question. I guess I would say it's probably easier to forgive others. In terms of forgiving myself and showing myself compassion, it mainly boils down to reflecting on what happened, looking for areas of improvement, but also giving yourself the grace and understanding that maybe you did have valid reasons for doing it, or even if they weren't valid, that it's okay to make mistakes every once in a while.
Neither. It's very difficult to forgive myself, and it's very difficult to forgive others. And ideally, it would be easy to forgive others, but I find that we so glibly say, "I'll forgive and forget," but not as good a job has been done in explaining what forgiveness is. And it's just, turn aside from, what it is that someone has done to you, without necessarily doing the hard work of confronting and doing the hard work of conflict negotiation. But anyways, the times that I have forgiven myself, I think the most, the easiest example that I can think of is, and naturally, something that I do is when experiencing emotions, and I credit my high school English teacher for just early on instilling this principle in my life, which is, if you're feeling a wave of sadness, just, experience it, don't fight it. And people will have different approaches, but that's definitely worked for me, where it's like, I'm sad today, and acknowledging that feeling and not giving myself a hard time for, not being as happy as I should be, or not being as peppy as I should be, but just, extending that compassion towards myself of just, you're experiencing an emotion right now. It's a really hard emotion. It's not a happy emotion, but this too will pass. And so that's an example of times that I've found it easier to forgive myself. But yeah, either way, I'm very hard on myself, and as a result, I can be very hard on others. And I also think we haven't done each other a lot of favors in terms of defining what forgiveness is and what it looks like.
I think, naturally it's easier to forgive your others than forgive yourself, right? Like, I think that's just a given, at least for me. Like, and why? I mean, I think, like to my point earlier, people love to please the group, right? Like we are social creatures who exist in groups, and if you just think about that, I think it's hard to like just be harsh to some people. I mean, obviously there's some things that people will do to you that you'll never forgive them for, and that's just how life is, and I have had that person in my life. But this is myself, I would say, like, I don't know, like there's some instances where I know I have done things badly, right? And I try to forgive myself. There are other instances where I knew I could have done better. And yeah, then it's like, okay, like, am I really going to forgive myself? Probably not. So yeah, that's why it's hard. In a situation like that, it's harder to say no to yourself. To forgive yourself, sorry.
Forgiving oneself is hard. I definitely struggle. I think, honestly, for me, it's 50-50. I struggle to to forgive, and I struggle to forgive myself for sure. But I think, at least on the forgiving myself part, how I've tried to work through that is by the same amount of leeway, the same amount of consideration, compassion that I show others, I at the very least try to direct that to myself. So the expectations that I have for others, I hold myself to that expectation. And oftentimes it just so happens that we are a lot more forgiving to others than we are to ourselves. So if you can at least, give yourself the same excuses, or allow the same excuses that others have for yourself, then it allows you to really forgive yourself. Something that I also find really helpful, or a phrase that I find really helpful, is you do the best that you can with the information you have at the time. And, understanding that we're all learning, we're all figuring it out. Nobody knows what the hell they're doing. It doesn't seem like that, but the older I get, the more senior I get in, my program and in life, the more I learn that nobody knows what they're doing. Everybody's winging it. Everybody's faking it till they make it. And that's okay. And as a result, you have to give yourself grace and know that had you known better at the time, you will do better. Now, once you do know better, you then have to commit to doing better, because information means that it allows us to change our behavior. So it's important for us to change our behavior once we have new information. But oftentimes when you think back when you were a kid, or even, in your teenage years or in your college years, or whenever, honestly, when you make a decision, you've made that decision not because you're crazy. Most of the time, most of us, we are trying our best, and most of us are trying to make the right decision. And sometimes you don't have all the information,
or we are constrained in, a many number of ways. And so with that in mind, it's okay. With whatever decision you made sense given the circumstances at the time. So I found that to be really comforting and allowing myself to show myself some compassion.
Do I find it easier to forgive myself versus to forgive other people? I think in the past, I struggled with both, in the sense of like, because I was such a perfectionist and I felt that any small mistake I did was terrible, I would beat myself up repeatedly, and was a reflection of the way I dealt with forgiveness with other people. I held a lot of grudges. I definitely feel like, obviously, on an external point, no one's going to see my internal battle. So it probably looked like it was easier for me to forgive myself than other people. But I think my lack of forgiveness of other people was a reflection of my self-deprecation and my inability to see, my fallibility. Like, being able to acknowledge, like, hey, you're not perfect, and that's okay. Let's move on. I really struggled with that. I think now, because I've been working on like loving myself more and being more forthcoming with myself and being able to say like, hey, like, you fucked up over here. It's not great, but let's work on it. Like, what can we do better and how can we move past it? I think it's given me the space to be more forgiving with other people. It's a work in progress, but I don't think I hold as many grudges. I feel like if something is egregious, yeah, I'm going to take time to really process that. I'm not going to just be like, oh my God, like, yeah, we're cool. But I definitely feel like once I get over something, I really do get over something. I'm not going to hold it against someone forever. I will be more discerning because, again, forgiveness doesn't mean I'm an idiot. I will be more discerning and be like, you know what, I've forgiven you, I have no problem, but I know that this relationship or this situation is not going to be something that can be continued. And there's some people who are able to, like, we can have a great conversation, but like, you know what, I think we've done a lot of growth. We can be in each other's lives again and in a different way, in a new way. So I'm definitely more open to that. But yeah, no, I think now, because I'm more forgiving of myself and more willing to see like, okay, you know what, I'm not great, I'm not perfect, I want to do better, and I have friends that keep me accountable, I am more forgiving of other people. I don't have the energy to be holding on to grudge. Do you know how much energy there is to hold on to a grudge? No. I don't have time for that. I'm going to be disappointed if someone hurts my feelings. I'm going to be disappointed if someone breaks my trust. I'm going to be disappointed. But I'm able, I think, to empathize. I think to do my best to listen to what the person's saying or hear them out and be like, listen, it's not working out for us. It's cool. I wish you well. I'm just more discerning now. We don't have to be in each other's lives or whatever. And like, not hold it against anybody. Like, it would have to be something really egregious for me to be like, I cannot forgive you. And even then, I just feel like if I will still forgive that person. I just won't be interacting with them. So definitely better now, much more mature now. But yeah, it's a daily place of work. Like, not a place of work, but like it's a daily journey of working through these things. So yeah,
I found it easier to forgive others than myself, as I have high expectations set for myself. So sometimes I'm hard on myself. And when things don't go as planned, I find it hard to let it go till I fix it. What helps is the ability to move on, to know that life goes on regardless, and that it's just a temporary thing. So life is too short to ponder on things for so long. So I try to look at the positives in life and then trying to be happy.
Sometimes it can be hard to forgive others because by the time it takes me to that point where it's hard to forgive, we've taken a long time to build up trust. So it's really hard for me to fall back on that. But I think what helps is when there's accountability and then there's a repair specific to the concern. So if we repair it over and over and over again and trust is rebuilt, then I'm all right.
I find it significantly easier to forgive other people. In fact, if you hurt me today, good chance by tomorrow morning I'm good. Like I've forgiven you equilaterally. I'm not gonna hold it over your head. I'm just going to forgive you. But when it comes to myself, I tend to not do the same thing, which would speak to the fact that maybe I don't love myself enough just yet, and I need to work on that. But the reason I don't forgive myself easily is because I hold myself to a very high standard. I expect excellence of myself, and you know what? That pressure is a lot, but I don't know how to turn it off just yet. So, what helps me forgive other people? How do I show myself compassion? What helps me forgive other people is it's a waste of time for me to hold on to that negative thing because there's nothing I can do about it. It's already happened. It's in the past, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I just let it go. I learned the lessons from it, but I let it go. How do I show myself compassion? More recently, I would say that I usually pause when I find myself in a cycle where I'm like blaming myself for something. I just usually pause and be like, okay, what exactly do you think is gonna come out of this? You're gonna be in the same place. It's already happened. It's in the past. Try to let it go. And I try to do that, and it's something I need to repeat to myself over and over again before I finally get to a place where I'm able to let it go. And I know I'm able to let it out, and I know I let it go when the thought comes and my heart is light. Can't explain it.
I actually find it easy to forgive myself. I feel like I just take it to the standpoint of just, God has forgiven me. And if he's forgiven me, then I need to forgive myself. I don't need to hold anything against myself or any grudges. Same applies to forgiving others as well. I'm one person actually who really shoves everything back. And even let's say maybe I'm in a situation where the person doesn't want to talk about the issue and they completely want to stop talking to me. It's okay. Let's say maybe they have wronged me. I'll forgive them and I'll move on. Yes, sometimes it'll come back to me like, okay, so we really couldn't fix this as adults. It's okay, we move on. So I feel like just incorporating God and all of that just really honestly helps. And I show myself compassion by reading the word. Just taking everything back to God. Like, okay, God gives me grace. And I need to also be able to give myself grace and also give others grace as well. Because we're not perfect. We all sin. So, yeah.
I think I forgive others very easily, but me, I never forget. I'll never forget. I'll always forgive. Not always forgive. I forgive for my own mental health, but I'll never ever forget. But do I find it easier to forgive myself? I'm learning to give myself grace. I'm learning to not paint myself as a bad person because I make a mistake. But I'm always praying that God forgives me for my mishaps, and I believe God speaks through us. So if I can, I'm learning. I'm still a student of trying to forgive myself, but I'm learning not to self-sabotage. So I am still practicing. But forgiving others, I always forgive others because I don't want to have any resentment towards me, but I'll never ever forget. If someone shows you who they are, believe them always. Even though you forgive them, believe that that's who they are. And that's all I have to say for that.
Before I was in a better place, I think forgiving myself was like the hardest thing. I was so lenient with other people and not as lenient to myself as I should have been. But now that I'm in a better space, I'm able to, with therapy as well, I'm able to have empathy of myself. And I don't know, maybe the whole being so hard on myself came from, I don't know, being a firstborn. I think let the firstborns gather here and tell me if I'm not the only one that's gone through this. But for now, forgiving myself, that's like a piece of cake. I mean, who's going to forgive me if I don't forgive myself? I'm already forgiven by Christ, and so I need to give myself that grace. And how I do this, I just try to remind myself that I'm only human, guys. I'm only doing this life. It's my first time doing this life thing. I've never been 21 before. There was nothing like past life. I can't remember it. So I just need to give myself the grace that, making mistakes, I'm only human, it's part of the journey. I've never done this before, so I need to be easy on myself. Plus, I've also got a killer playlist. There's just something about music that has a way of just picking up your mood, like, mood picker. I have a playlist that's my go-to. I'm a dancer, so music and dancing, get into a place of forgiving myself. I just dance like nobody's watching me. Like, I have the best moves. Like, I am the main character. And showing myself compassion, it's what I've learned when it comes to forgiving myself, because how can I stay being mad at myself for having the best moves ever?
Sometimes it's easier to forgive others, right? Of course, I'll put the caveat of like depending on what they did and how it affected you, right? But from my experience, I think it's easier to forgive others because there's always things you can make up about them. Oh, they didn't know what they were doing. Oh, you can always make up a story that, you can avoid verifying. You're like, you know what? This person didn't mean to do this because I know they're good and all that kind of stuff. That's okay. It's different from benefit of doubt, but you can always make up a story to forgive somebody. I think that's why people stay in situations which are like, you know what? For example, like work. Sometimes somebody works in a place you're like, I don't know how you survive in this place, but my boss is okay. I'm still paying the bills, and it's a similar way. You can always come up with reasons and stories to help that case. But forgiving yourself, unless you're borderline delusional narcissistic, coming up with it's harder to at least for me to come up with ways to defend myself, because I'm like, well, I should have known. I'm like, well, you did this, you didn't know any better. But I think about myself and I know myself. I'm like, yeah, you kind of did. So, it makes it harder because it's harder to make excuses for me because I promised myself long ago that I would not lie to myself. So I think sometimes it's harder for me to forgive myself because I know myself too well. You know yourself. It is what it is, right? You can't come up with any story or that sounds nice to forgive what you did or whatever. So I think for me, at least, it's harder to forgive myself because I know me, But for somebody else, I can always give them it's easier to give somebody a benefit of doubt and, do some long tale or some sort of story that helps with that story of forgiveness. So, yeah. So what helps me forgive myself? I think it's a function of time and compassion. I know you've asked, well, how do you show yourself compassion, right? Accepting that you're human. You're always a work in progress. It doesn't matter how good you are. There's always something you can do better, But understanding that, hey, I did. Sometimes you just did the best you could at the time you had with the information you had, right? And not going back to revisit past mistakes or past things you've done. If you're done with it, you've understood what went wrong. Dwelling on it just does you more harm than it could. So I think part of it is just a function of time. When it happens, of course, it's not gonna be like, hey, I forgive myself and I move on. That's just not my personality particularly. I sit with it. I understand what went wrong, and then give myself compassion. I'm like, hey, George, you know better. You're gonna do better, and you keep moving forward. So try not to make the same mistake twice. Sometimes it's very hard, but more often than not, that helps. And you keep moving forward. Just keep moving forward.
Yeah. So being a recovering people pleaser, it is much easier to forgive others than myself overall. I think I'm a pretty kind of understanding person within reason. If people do something that hurts my feelings and they acknowledge it and apologize, I immediately am like, it's cool. We're good. Just like learn from the experience and whatnot. So over the last couple years, I've kind of dabbled in more self-compassion practices and kind of looked at the research a little bit more. So that has been really helpful for me to practice self-compassion, realizing that Also, like, as we are more self-compassionate to ourselves, that also increases compassion towards others, so says the research. In the practice, so that helps me, in terms of the motivation. In terms of the practice of self-compassion, it's helpful for me to tap into realizing what I'm feeling in this moment. So if I'm feeling guilty or whatever, if we're talking about forgiving others or forgiving myself, acknowledging that it's a feeling, that it will pass, just like any other feelings pass. And then acknowledging that this is something, like this experience right now, this experience of like suffering in my guilt, is something that other people experience. So acknowledging I'm not alone in this experience, that can be really helpful in my self-compassion practice. Also, more just like kind of more affirmation-y type things can be helpful. Like if I'm doing a yoga class, for instance, or something that feels good for me, or that is for me, by saying like, I'm doing this for myself because I am worthy. It is an act of self-compassion. Telling myself those things has been really helpful to build that compassion for myself and therefore others.
I definitely don't have a good answer on showing compassion to myself, as I can be pretty critical. So I don't know if there's an easy way, but I'd love to hear what other people do in terms of showing myself compassion. I think it's easier to forgive others than forgive yourself sometimes, because you know how much effort you put in and how much effort you didn't.
I think for me personally, I do find it a lot easier to, in some situations, to forgive myself, because oftentimes, obviously, I'm making the decision, so I know why I did the things that I did, and sometimes that doesn't necessarily come across to others the way that it should, but I do know my intentions behind them. I do find it a little bit harder to forgive others in certain situations, just because sometimes somebody can hurt you and you think that they intend to hurt you, when in reality that might not necessarily be the case. I think that's a really tough question, because for me it's a bit of a toss-up. There are definitely situations where I find it harder to forgive myself, and then there are situations where I find it harder to forgive others.
I find it easier to forgive others than forgiving myself. And the reason for that is because I can't control other people's actions. I can only control my own actions. And so inherently, how can I sit down and take the time to focus on other people's actions and have such high expectations when they can easily disappoint me, hurt me, because it's something that's unpredictable, right? It's their actions, it's their mistakes, and I can't predict that. So for me, forgiving them doesn't take too long, because I already have this understanding, this underlying understanding in dealing with relationships between people and myself. And so I still find it easy, not easier, to forgive myself, because I take time to reflect and sit down and really go through those emotions when I've done something wrong. And in doing so, I'm able to figure out how not to do something wrong, or something of that magnitude wrong again, and then go from there. So it really is going back to that fundamental question of self-awareness and being emotionally intelligent, and understanding yourself through that emotional intelligence. And from there, you're able to still forgive yourself. But overall, I do find it easier to forgive others than forgiving myself, because I set high expectations and I do control my own actions. And so I'm tougher on myself than I am on others.
I am definitely my own harshest critic, so I find it easier to forgive other people than it is for me to forgive myself. Now, I forgive myself within reason, like say, say I do something, like I've actually learned to show myself a little bit of grace, the same grace or the same kindness that I show to other people. I'm actively learning to show myself the same because I'm a lot kinder to other people. I'm way nicer to other people. Even the things that I say out loud, some of the things that I say out loud to myself, I would never say that to another person. So in terms of forgiving others, like I've definitely always treated other people better than I treat myself, but that's a work in progress where I am trying to also pretty much what I extend to other people, I'm trying to extend to myself. So when it comes to forgiving myself, if I make a silly mistake, I've been telling myself that, hey, it's okay to mess up. I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. But the problem comes when it becomes a pattern. That's why I find it even harder to forgive myself because I'm like, well, when you reflected on this, you said you're not going to do this anymore. So in those instances where I do the same thing, like maybe once or twice or more, like twice or more, it becomes a little concerning. And I find those instances a little bit harder to forgive myself for because I told myself, well, you already said you were going to change or improve on this, but you haven't. And why? So showing myself compassion, I do that through, not being too hard on myself, not being harsh. The thoughts that I think about myself, trying to think kind thoughts. I've got into the habit of sitting in front of the mirror every once in a while and just like telling myself good things like, oh, hey, look at that smile, I'm just like learning to appreciate myself more. Because once I connect with myself in that way, I believe it'll be easier to understand myself better and to know where I was coming from when I messed up. And if I mess up a second time, like maybe know how to correct myself so that doesn't happen again. It all starts with just some inner reflection and getting to know myself better and telling myself the same kind words or nice things that I tell other people. That's where it starts for me.
So in terms of forgiving yourself, my mom always says this to me. She's always saying, or she says this to us, as a family, like, be kind to yourself, and reward yourself from time to time. And I think that just comes from a place where sometimes if you're a high achiever or you have goals you want to achieve, we tend to then punish ourselves. We don't give ourselves a break. And sometimes even when we do mess up and it's something that we really wanted, you kind of say to yourself, I'm a loser, etc. And you're always saying, no, be kind to yourself. You're only human, and some things you're not going to be able to accomplish, and some things you are. And when you don't, or when you fall short, forgive yourself and say, hey, listen, I haven't lost yet. I will try again and get up again and try again. So I think that kind of mentality has really helped me in life. I don't think I have any grudges against myself to say, but then this is. I think life happens, and sometimes I can look back and understand the decisions I made and why I made them in that choice. They may not be the most popular decision with everyone, but I know why I made that decision. And for me, I think having control over those decisions gives me autonomy and kind of puts me in a place where I'm saying to myself, at least I was true to myself. It may not have been a popular decision for that, and I know it may have backfired, and people might say, oh, look, you lost that opportunity, or you could have done A, B, C, D, and look where you are, And I think you can easily fall into a trap of into a pit of self-loathing, etc. But just forgive yourself and say, hey, listen, now I know better, I'll do better. So that's one way. Forgiving others comes easy for me simply because empathy. I think just trying to understand why the person is doing what they're doing and why they felt the need to, to express whatever it is that they were expressing and did what they did to you. And I think understanding that it takes more energy to hold a grudge than to forgive is also something that's very essential, because it can take a lot of energy, to try to say, I'm happy right now, but when a person enters a room because I have a grudge with them, I have to now turn my smile upside down into a frown and kind of say, oh no, I'm now feeling a type of way because this person is entered. But really, I've been feeling good, I've been having a good time, but because this person is not into the room, I now need to, and it's fine when you still feel those feelings. But I feel like after a certain while, those feelings fade, I think it's more of a thing now, you kind of social construct of saying, oh, but they did this to you, and people want to remind you, or you want to remind yourself that they did this horrible thing to you. I'd feel like those feelings won't be as strong yet at that time, but you have to conjure it up within yourself to say, okay, let's crank it up now. Those bad feelings, let's bring them up now. Okay, yes, they're now at the head of my head. Okay, now I remember, the feeling is now familiar. I hate you again. It takes up a lot of energy to just forgive someone. And I think sometimes when it comes to forgiving people, it's not necessarily a situation whereby they are also going to feel like, you can forgive someone, but they might still hold something against you. And you have to be okay with that fact, because that is just what happens, because what's happening in your head and what's happening in your heart is not necessarily the same thing that's going to be happening in the other person's heart. You may pick up the phone and say, hey, listen, I forgive you. And they're like, forgive me, I had done something wrong to you, you had a grudge against me. They might even be as surprised to find out that you're actually holding something against them, So it's got a lot to do with yourself. And I think even from my experience, it just takes a lot more energy for you to hate someone and to not forgive them. Forgive them, don't forget it, but definitely forgive them, because I think it's a weight off your own heart, is my opinion.
I find it much easier to forgive others than myself. I often look at when I did something wrong or something went wrong, all of the ways that my own personal faults contributed to it. I have a really hard time telling myself that I could and am allowed to mess up. And by making a mistake, that's how you learn. It's really scary to forgive yourself. I have so much love and grace for other people in my life that I need to extend to myself more frequently than I do. But once again, it's something that I'm working on as like a self-reflection, self-awareness, and that we're human, nobody's perfect, and everyone messes up, including me.
To be honest, I have never had a problem with forgiving myself. In the moment, I might be a bit hard on myself, ask myself why, why I did that. I should know better, I should do better. But in the long term, I always forgive myself and move on. That's definitely a superpower that the Lord gave me. And I'm incredibly grateful for that, because I'm able to shake things off. I'm able to fail, and still be okay, and not wallow in a hole of regret and despair. So yeah, I don't know how someone can learn to do that, but I think overall, it's an overall positive to be able to, forgive yourself and say it's okay. You're not perfect, and move on.
Oh, this is also a very deep one. I think it's easier for me to forgive others than forgiving myself. I think I just probably hold myself to a very high standard, sometimes a very painful standard as well to live up to. So it makes it a little hard for me to forgive myself. I forgive others because I feel a little easily, I should say, not like for every little thing. And I think because I feel like having flaws or being flawed is part of a human experience, and sometimes people don't do stuff that they mean or have the resources to have negotiated with themselves to like come up with a different response. And I can forgive stuff like that, but if it's a recurring behavior or if it's something done out of malice, or like I just don't want to have a continued relationship with the person, then yeah, forgiving is not the thing I would choose to do. But I would say it's definitely easier to forgive others, generally speaking. And what helps me forgive myself is also the thought of knowing that I am the best ally I can be to myself. I'm literally the person who has front row seats to my thoughts and my unconscious thoughts and just stuff that's floating around in my head, and like my childhood experiences and like everything that's going on in my head. So I am the person who can put all of these pieces together. So I am my best ally, and that's what helps me to forgive. And the motivation to forgive also comes from knowing that I am in the pursuit of having a full human experience, and that means I have to live with myself at peace and not live in constant conflict in my head. So to keep moving forward and to allow people in my space, which means I can only allow people when I'm, at peace with myself. Forgiveness is the way to do it. And that's also how I would show myself self-compassion, just to have a really fulfilling and enriching human experience. And to do that, I got to show up for myself first, and that enables me to allow people in my space to do that.
I think as humans in general, we find it much easier to forgive ourselves than to forgive others. Because when we look at ourselves, we judge ourselves by our intentions. And when we look at others, we judge them by their actions and their outcomes. So one thing I've tried to integrate into my own life over the last few years is to judge myself by the actions and the outcomes. Because when I look at my intentions, I can always see that in general, my intentions are 90% of the time, they're good. But it's the actions and the outcomes that hurt the people around me. But I think one thing that's helped me to improve the way I forgive myself is definitely not holding myself to a standard of perfection. And I think that also came through not being able to say no to people, is that I was holding myself to this big standard that, I'm the guy. If you need anything, it's me. I'm never going to disappoint you. But I think once I started to learn that it's okay to disappoint people, then I also started to learn that it's okay sometimes to disappoint myself. And I'm better able to handle those situations when they arise.
When it comes to forgiveness, I think it's important to realize that people are people and that we all fall short. We are not perfect. And even looking at yourself, you're not a perfect person. I'm not a perfect person. So I think approaching forgiveness with that kind of perspective helps to see that, okay, someone may have done something to hurt me. But okay, yeah, they did that, but I can't necessarily put them on a pedestal and expect them to always do right by me. They're going to fall short because they're not perfect. And I think having that understanding of people allows forgiveness to be an easier thing to happen. And I think also as an individual looking at yourself, seeing how you could also fail and how at times you have certain expectations or, certain things that you expect of yourself and you fall short of that. You're not perfect. And, having that grace, because at the end of the day, it's grace. Having that grace for others and for yourself makes forgiveness easier.
I find it easier to forgive other people than myself. Because, firstly, mental health. I like my peace. I do not stress over things which I have no control over. Secondly, I always feel like I should be aware of what will happen. I should always look and analyze situations before they happened. Look at the bad side, look at the good side.
To answer your question about forgiving others and finding it easy to do so, I don't know if I would use the word easy, but I do forgive others. So I don't know how I can quantify it as to say easy, I definitely find it easier to forgive someone if they apologize, right? The minute you apologize about something, then it's over, for sure, The harder ones are to forgive when there is no apology. Yeah, when there is no apology, finding a way to forgive, because as a Christian, I still need to be able to forgive you. But I'm a human being. So I need to now find a way to forgive you without an apology. And that's always the harder corner to turn. But it still must be done. So how I do that is that I introspect a lot. I have to think about it. I have to pray about it. I have to meditate about it. And I'm telling you, the amount of perspective you get when you do those things, when you even journal about it and pack it, repack it, It's amazing that corner you can turn and how you can come out of that place of anger, frustration, and actually find forgiveness just by speaking to the greatest forgiver of all, which is Jesus Christ, and knowing how much he's forgiven your sins and all the things that you've done. How can you not forgive what someone else has done to you? That whatever that is, that item is, becomes microscopic compared to how much forgiveness you have received. So that is how I work through forgiveness with people. Then with myself, I find it harder to forgive myself because, you've got high expectations of yourself. You want to do your best. You want to do the right thing. So when you do things wrong, it's harder to forgive yourself because I expect better from myself. But again, I think when you understand forgiveness from this perspective of how much forgiveness you've received from Jesus Christ, it becomes almost selfish, prideful to not forgive myself because I've already been forgiven by God himself. So who am I to hold things against myself? So understanding that more has allowed me to show myself more self-compassion and forgive myself and others easier over time, the more understanding I have of the forgiveness that I have received.
Wow, that is a tough question. I would like to believe that I forgive people, but I guess the thing that makes it hard, and both for the others and also for myself, is forgetting. So basically, I feel like it's fairly easy for me to forgive myself and for me to forgive others, but the hard side is that I feel like I very distinctly remember things and very sharply remember things, and so it just randomly comes to my mind, and typically it's for the things for myself where I'm like, oh dang, like I remember when I did XYZ. So because of that, I think I'd say it's harder to forgive myself, but I show myself compassion though by like reminding myself that the people forgave me if it's something that I would have done to someone else. And then also just reminding myself of all the different good things that I've done for that person, or also just like in general helps. And I think that's a way I show myself compassion there.
I would say nowadays I find it a lot easier to forgive myself. I guess others as well. Because I always know that, let's say if I have a goal that I want to meet and, I don't meet it, I try not to, usually before I will get so hard on myself to the point like I would really stress myself out and almost kind of get into that depression phase. So I've learned that, if a goal's not missed, it's okay. We can always achieve that goal, just find, adjustments to make sure we meet it. So I definitely have found it easier to do that, and I've been able to show myself compassion and just be able to be optimistic about every situation and just kind of learn to always be positive. And one of the best things I always use that my dad always told me is like you use more muscles being angry than when you smile. So I was trying to, in the back of my head, have that, I can't go a day without smiling. I shouldn't be able to go a day without smiling. So that's been a way of me that helps me, forgive myself when I miss things, and as well as like if others do something that, I might not have been happy with, to kind of just, forgive them and forgive myself as well.
Do I find it easier to forgive others or to forgive myself? That has definitely changed over the years. In the past, it was so much easier to forgive others than to forgive myself. And now I'm at a point where it's so much easier to forgive myself than to forgive others. So I'll start talking about, in the past first. When I was younger, and younger even goes into like early 20s, really, or yeah, early to mid 20s even. It was really hard for me to forgive myself. And I think it was because of perfectionism and having set a very high standard for myself. And so when I looked back at certain things that I did or decisions I made or situations I allowed myself to be in, I'd be very, very hard on myself. And I'd have been like, I should have known better. I know better and I should have done that. But it was very tiring because it was like an endless loop of like, just why did I do that? Or why did I allow that to happen? And so because it got tiring, I was just like, clearly I need to learn something else. And I think that's when I kind of let go off of the perfectionism. And the thing is, the perfectionism is not something I required from other people. It was just for myself because of my own standards that I had set for myself and expectations for myself. So I think after that, I guess my go-to, I will use excuse for lack of a better word, when I wanted to forgive myself became I was younger and I didn't know any better, right? Because hindsight is always 20/20, but when you're in the situation, you just don't see it that way. And so I think a lot of the things, for me to be able to forgive myself for a lot of the things that I did in the past or situations I was in or whatever it was, I tended to just go to I was younger, and that's okay. I was young. Now I know better, and so I was able to let that go. I think now with the whole forgiving myself, sometimes it does come back with like, I'll do something and I'm like, come on, like, why did I do this? So I shouldn't have done this. Like, it was wrong. I shouldn't have done it. And in those situations, now they're like rare occurrences, but when it does happen, what has helped me to forgive myself is talking to close friends. And there are like a couple of situations, which I won't talk about here, but there are a couple of situations that I can think of where I did some things that I was like, oh man, this was just, it should not have been done, right? And what helped me to forgive myself was when I was having conversations with like very trusted close friends, they were able to like, I don't know, talk me down a little bit and be like, yo, you're expecting a lot out of yourself and it's okay. Like now that this has happened, like better and it's not going to happen again. So talking to friends has also just helped a lot. Now talking about forgiving others, honestly, forgiveness is tough. I will say though, and I'm curious what people think about this. I think that I can forgive people, but I don't necessarily forget. And so I know the different philosophies on these things. And some people say like, if you're unable to forget, then it means that you didn't forgive. So I don't know. Have I really forgiven people if I still remember what they did? And also, I feel like I can forgive someone, but the nature of the relationship changes sometimes, right? It's like, okay, you did this. I'm going to let it go, but I'm not going to be the same person. Or like the relationship is not going to be the same as it was. I think another thing about forgiveness I want to bring up is how hard it is to forgive someone who has not asked for forgiveness. And, it can be situations where it's like, it could be a relationship or it could be like friendships that kind of like end without closure. And you feel like, oh my gosh, this person did me wrong, but it's not, maybe the person is not receptive to having the conversation, or maybe you just don't want to open that can of worms. I think that can be very, very hard to forgive. It's probably, well, depending on what the person has done, I feel like it's easier sometimes to forgive someone when they've at least asked for forgiveness. But if they haven't, I'm not going to lie, like, it's a struggle. So all I will say is on this forgiveness thing, it's definitely a work in progress. It's not easy. It's tough, but I've made a lot of progress on forgiving myself. And you know what? It's fine. I think life is more liberating now that I can forgive myself.